Okay, hi everybody. This is Betsy Hill, president of Brainware Learning Company, and we're just delighted that you're able to join us this morning. I keep trying to make it morning for whatever reason. This afternoon for our webinar on stress and learning. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. One is that we are recording today's session, and so if you know of others who weren't able to be here or you want to come back and refer to it later, whatever, it will be recorded, or if you have to leave early, that kind of thing. And everybody who is registered, those who attend or even those who don't, will get an automatic email when the recording is posted. And typically that takes less than 24 hours. So you should probably be getting an email sometime tomorrow with that information. As we go along, if you have questions, we really encourage you to ask questions. I know we love to get feedback, and you can do that in the chat window. Hopefully, I know at least Susan and Deborah have found the chat window. Hopefully everybody else will find it too, but just type your questions in there as we go along. There are the handouts for today, which includes Dr. Whitaker's slides, are available behind the handouts tab, and you can just download them directly from there. If you have any difficulty with that, you can always email us, and I will give you my contact information in just a moment. And the last thing is that when you registered, you indicated whether you wanted to have a certificate of participation for professional development purposes. And so those often take us a few days following the webinar, but we will get those out to you. If you didn't request one and you would like to do it, would like to have a certificate, I'm going to put my email address in the chat window. So questions about handouts, questions about anything else, frankly, regarding the webinar, you can feel free to email me and we will take care of whatever that is. All right. Without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker today, who is Dr. Lou Whitaker. Lou has been a very close friend of mine for a number of years now, and I just think she is such a treasure, and I'm just so delighted she agreed to do this. She has spent the better part of the last decade, maybe a little bit more, studying application of neuroscience principles in education. She does work and consults in both education and business settings. She has provided leadership and all the way from the principal's office to the district administrative office. She's taught students of all ages, from preschoolers to high school students to pre-service teachers. And I know that one of her favorite groups to talk to these days are seniors about their brains and the best practices for getting the most from them. She's won a number of awards, including the 2013 Principal of the Year Award, the Neuroscience-Based Teaching and Learning School Award, a Catholic Schools of Tomorrow Award. So she's been recognized in a variety of venues. She has her master's degree from National Louis University, her EDD in educational leadership from Nova Southeastern. And one of her special roles these days is that she's vice president of the board of directors of Florida ASCD, where she is really delivering a lot of wonderful content and benefit and opportunities for the members of the Chicago chapter. Okay, so Lou, if I've forgotten anything, please feel free to share that with us, but otherwise I will just let you get started and take us to school on the neuroscience.
Thanks, Betsy. Boy, I sound so good. I can't wait to hear me speak. I mean, that was great. I appreciate all the compliments. But I am on the Florida ASCD board. I would love to help Chicago anytime you want. I don't know if you thought that you said I was helping with the Chicago ASCD, but I'll be happy to help them too. But okay. I really want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to educators who are interested in really finding out about the brain and how we learn best and what we can do. So today's little webinar is really set up to talk about neuroscience and stress and learning and so forth. So Our basic agenda, what we want to cover today is looking at neuroscience and how stress affects the brain as well as the body, and looking at the impact of stress on learning and development. When children are under stress, or you as an adult when you're under stress, learning really is difficult to do, and we'll go into why and so forth. So we're going to talk about what causes the stress, how to reduce it, taming, and using the stress more or less to our advantage. But first of all, what are some of the major stress issues for you? We're going to be asking our participants, and Betsy, I'm going to turn it back to you, to take a poll. Which of the following is a major stress issue for you? And a check all that apply. Is it your family, your friends, either husband or your children or personal relationships? Or is there a lot of stress at work? Or perhaps you're worried about finances, time management. What about health? Especially in January, we're all going to lose those extra pounds. And what about your physical and mental health? And then any other that you can elaborate in the chat if you wish. So check those and then hit submit. So then we'll be able to take a look at those.
So we're getting quite a number of responses, and they're all across the board. So I suspect that people are clicking on more than one. And typically there are multiple stressors in our lives. So I'll just give everybody another moment or two to click on any responses they would like to share. So it seems to have plateaued pretty much. Nope, it's still going up. So I'll give another few seconds here. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And if you go to the poll, you should be able to see the results. The top answer, Lou, was work, followed closely by time management. And those probably related to each other. Followed closely by finances, followed closely by family, followed closely by health. And then, so pretty much across the board, there are a couple of people who said other. I don't know if they've had an opportunity to share anything additional. Doesn't look like it, but anyway, so a lot of stressors in everybody's lives, I guess.
Okay, Betsy, how do I get back to the other screen? I'm still looking at poll on my screen here. No.
Did you submit yours?
Submit one. There we go. Okay, now I'm all set. Good. Yeah. That was a little stressful, but I'm back on track.
Good.
That's right.
Well,
I model and demonstrate at all of my workshops. So, so as Betsy had mentioned, there's many things, across the board, many different situations that occur in our lives that can cause the stress. So we're going to be talking about some of those. Now, what are some of the reasons your students are stressed? Think about your students right now in your classroom. Do you know if they have family concerns, or if you're living in an area that is high in poverty? What about the cognitive, their academic ability, their cognitive skills, or perhaps it's English language you're having problems with because they just moved to our country? Perhaps you have some students that their physical health is a concern. That nutrition isn't there. Perhaps they've witnessed violence within their family or in their neighborhood. Or what about these natural disasters between the fires in California and the hurricanes, all over, especially down here in Florida? What have you found to be one or two of the reasons that your children seem to be stressed? So pick out an area of one or two of concerns, and then we'll take a look at the poll.
Well, we're getting a lot of responses here as well. And that's great. We really appreciate everybody. I think it's sort of fun to answer polls and to see what everybody thinks in a webinar like this. Okay, well, it looks like we're sort of plateaued now. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And what we can see on the numbers is that the top one is family. 30% of the respondents said family. Right, not far behind that, 27% said cognitive ability and language. So I don't know if that's and then poverty is a little bit behind that. And the other ones were all mentioned, including the natural disasters, health, violence, although not to as high a degree as the other ones. So is that typical of what you find, Lou?
It depends on, obviously, like this last year in particular with the natural disasters has really changed things. But yes, when they're having, if they're stressed out because of their family situation, and society has really changed over the years, so the family unit is constantly changing. But taking a look at the family as well as poverty areas and so forth, cognitive ability and the English language, because we're having such an influx, especially down here in Florida, because of the Puerto Rico and that horrible situation, how those children must be under so much stress coming to a new country, not being able to speak the language and fitting into a classroom. How can we help those students? So yes, all of these are a real concern. And it will definitely affect their learning, that's for sure. So let's see if you can recall a time. Have you personally ever had a very stressful situation where all of a sudden you just couldn't think straight? I mean, some simple task. For example, if you had a fender bender and all of a sudden you have to call your husband and you can't remember his number. Thank heaven it's on speed dial, right? And you're thinking, this is ridiculous. I should be able to remember this. What's my son's phone number? Or after the fender bender, how do I get to the directions? So how does that make you feel? So stop for just a second and just kind of think about a situation that you've been in where maybe you couldn't think straight, or when it happens in the future, it'll make more sense of why you're not thinking properly, because what happens. I'd like to kind of talk about a personal situation that happened with me where stress really hijacks the brain, because all of your attention is focused on that situation and you can't think clearly. Even normal, simple acts like getting directions or reading a map, all of a sudden you can't do that. Well, I was in a situation where I was an associate superintendent of schools for the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. And I had a presentation. I was new to the position, so I wanted to impress everyone. So I wore my three-piece suit, looked very professional, high heels. And it was a workshop having to do with our school boards and training our school boards. So we had 3 different schools there, 3 different principals, 3 pastors, the entire school board from all 3 schools. And the presentation went just fine. Well, my husband usually comes along with me to help me with my equipment, carrying the books in and out, and projector and stuff like this. So at the end of the presentation, he grabbed a few of my books and walks out to the car, and I finished packing everything up, and I noticed he didn't come back in. So I walked outside. Now, this is February in Milwaukee, so it's cold. There's snow and ice on the ground, and I'm in my heels and skirt, and I go walking, and he's sitting in the car with the windows open, the car running. And I look in, I go around to the passenger side, and I take some books and throw them in the back. And I went, what's going on? I said, can't you help me? What's going on? He goes, I can't. I said, what? And he goes, something happened to the car. The car caught on fire. I saw an electrical spark go on. Now the doors are locked. I can't open the door. So you're going to have to crawl in the front window and get in the car. Just get in. Don't think it, just get in. So immediately, what flashes through my mind, now mind you, pastors are standing around, school board members, should I enter head first into the front seat or one leg at a time? Couldn't quite decide. Luckily, I had enough sense where all of a sudden something shot in and said, wait, Lou, stop. Don't do that. You're going to look ridiculous. So I looked at my husband and I said, okay, the car's running. Can you turn the car off? He said, yes. I said, all right, turn it off. And then I went, hand me the keys. And he handed me the keys, and I took them out and I unlocked the door and got in the front seat. Well, the both of us looked at each other and went, what just happened? I mean, any 12-year-old kid walking by, seeing what was happening, he would have said, turn the car off and hand her the keys and unlock the door. I could not figure out what to do. So what had happened was my brain was actually hijacked into a situation where you have to react. You have to do something. So do I want to go head first or one leg at a time? Luckily, I did neither, and we figured it out. So, so what exactly happens when your brain really gets hijacked like that? I'm going to jump right into Robert Sapolsky's book on why zebras don't get ulcers. It's an excellent book. He is a great writer. He's a great scientist. He's a neuroendocrinologist from Stanford University. And he really talks a great deal in this book about stress and what it does to the human body. And he's talking about zebras and lions and so forth out on the savannah. And I think he does a great explanation. And what we're going to do is talk about that in just a minute. But for right now, if you would just look at this list, and if you can please check which systems, human body systems, do you think are going to be affected by stress? Check all that you think. There's more than one, but think which ones are going to be affected by stress. Once you have those, go ahead and submit.
Everybody's busy clicking on their answers. So we're getting quite a few responses. It's like there are a few more coming in. Okay, I think we're leveling off now. So I will go ahead and close the poll. And I want to tell you, this is a very smart group, Lou, because pretty much everybody.
And that's the correct answer. Some of the systems rev up and act stronger. Some of them actually go down and shut off. So they're both affected, but which way do they move? And so we'll go into that in just a second. But let's go back to Robert Sapolsky and talk about the animals that are out on the savannah. There's a zebra that's drinking, relaxing and so forth. And then there's a lion, and the lion can see the zebra. Well, the lion decides that's his dinner. So the lion jumps up and starts to move. The zebra begins to realize that he's going to be eaten, will also get up and move very quickly. So actually, both of them, their stress response in both animals reacts the same way. The senses become on high alert, okay? The lungs are working overtime. The heart rate increases, pumping oxygen, and blood pressure goes up, pumping that blood and oxygen down to the muscles so they can run. So that zebra's taken off, and that lion is right behind him. The blood clotting is on standby, just in case somebody gets ripped open. Muscles respond instantly. Now, what is interesting is that not 100% of the body, all the systems could be working at that time. So it decides to shut down certain systems. So what should shut down? Well, first of all, growth and development. Who cares how tall you are or your development at that time? The reproduction. I love Robert Sapolsky. He says it's no time to ovulate. So your reproduction systems actually shut off when the stress response system kicks in. Tissue repair is suspended at this time. The immune system shuts down. Don't worry about catching a cold. You got to get out of here. And then appetite is suppressed. Robert Sapolsky says, why worry about what to eat when you're about to be eaten? So I think this really summarizes what happens. But he says, but when it's over, it's over. Either the lion catches his dinner, okay, or the zebra gets away. Either way, the stress response shuts down and then goes back to normal homeostasis. Remember that when you were in junior high, homeostasis, that means when your body all the systems are working normally at the correct levels. And so it immediately goes back. And that's what we want to happen. What happens just a little bit different is in humans. So what is happening during the initiation of the stress response? When they see a danger or they perceive that a danger, the stress response is alerted. So the amygdala through the hippocampus sends out an alarm. And three hormones are really kicked in. The first one, adrenaline and noradrenaline, sometimes acts as neurotransmitters, but they also act as hormones in the bloodstream. So they're in the bloodstream to get that body moving. The adrenal gland produces the third hormone, cortisol. Now, this is very important to understand. Cortisol is designed to keep the body alert from minutes to hours. It's in case the stress goes longer. That's why that one kicks in. So the immediate effects in the following system: the cardiovascular, endocrine, respiratory, nervous, musculoskeletal. But what shuts down and not needed is the digestive, the reproductive, and the immune system. So those shut down. Now, in Dr. Pat Wolf, in her book Brain Matters, which we'll be talking about throughout today's presentation, she mentions that the brain will check the memory system and really just to see, retrieve information pertaining to the situation. If I walk out and I see a snake over there and the colors are red, yellow, and black, right away I'm going to think, I think it's a coral snake. I'm not sure if it's a king snake or a coral snake. I'm not taking any chances. I'm going to get away from it just to play it safe. So it does check to see what you know about the situation. Let's go back to the savannah for just a minute. All right, out in the area, when it's over, it's over. When the lion catches his dinner or the zebra gets away, remember the stress response shuts down and everything goes back to normal homeostasis. But in humans, it's a little different. Sapolsky goes on, he says, we're thinking about the ozone layer, taxes, morality, 30 years mortgages, and we're not doing it for the real physiological reasons. We're doing it nonstop. Okay? And he said a zebra would never understand why we turn on the same stress response when speaking in public, but we do. So people under chronic stress at work or have problems in relationship, or they're like, for example, a student that's being bullied, all right, or you're driving in traffic in the morning, the stress response system is working overtime. We don't shut it off as easy as the zebra did. So let's go back to the slide where I was showing you what's happening to the body when stress response is initiated. Remember, senses are on high alert, lungs work overtime, and so forth. But look at the red area. Okay, what is not needed shuts down. So growth and development begins to slow down. Reproduction system slows down. Tissue repair is suspended. But the immune system shuts down. So after long periods of time, you can imagine what will happen to your body. Appetite is suppressed. So that's why we get sick, okay? And why stress is called the #1 killer. The National Geographic has an excellent CD out, and it's called Stress Portrait of a Killer. And I'd highly recommend looking at that. Robert Sapolsky talks about his studies and so forth, but it explains why stress is so bad on our poor bodies. So how does stress, what does this stress pertain to learning? Let's take a look specifically at learning. There are basically two types of stress. Acute stress, which is for short periods of time. That's for fight or flee, right? Fight or flight. And then there's chronic, prolonged stress. So the acute stress, which is the short stress, is actually a good stress for us. And it's designed really to protect the body and so forth. It puts the senses on high alert. It senses immediate threats, but it returns to homeostasis quickly because it primes the brain to improve performance. So acute stress, like before you're giving a presentation or a speech, your body is all revved up and you want your senses high. Olympic performers, for example, that acute stress is very, very important. If they didn't have that, they would not have that extra energy that they need in their presentation and so forth. And we talked about the 3 hormones that are released. So in the good stress, adrenaline and noradrenaline are stress hormones. Cortisol is also produced, but it disappears, it dissipates after a stressful situation is over. And that's what really helps you when you're running out of a burning building. You want something to help you react quickly, get you out of the building when you know you're safe. Okay, then the body goes back to normal. Now, bad stress, distress, or chronic stress is stress that is prolonged. Now, remember, cortisol is designed for long periods of time, but when it builds up over a long period of time, all of a sudden health problems begin to develop. High blood pressure, obesity, especially extra weight around the middle, okay? Diabetes, heart disease, and so forth. So all of these diseases are enhanced and so forth because of the buildup of the cortisol. So what kind of stress do you want in your classroom? A stress-free classroom, no stress at all in that classroom when they walk in. Either low or moderate stress in the classroom or high stress in the classroom. Well, I think we know we don't want high stress, but we really don't want no stress at all either. Okay, we want our children to perform. That's for sure. And in studies by Coffer, she wrote a really great article, What Neuroscience Can Teach Us About Teaching. She's from Berkeley. And she's really talking about neuroplasticity and how the brain can change. The behaviors and conditions that influence neuroplasticity are sleep, nutrition, exercise, stress, mainly cortisol levels, and happiness, which are your dopamine levels in the brain. Now, these exist in dynamic relation to one another. And so voluntary exercise can counter stress. She explains in the relationship between stress and cognition. So if you look at that little curve there, that if you really want to have the low to moderate stress, you want the children excited about taking the test, prepared for the test, feeling that they've got to do good, that will help them get through that. Not, oh, I don't care if I get it right or wrong. So you want low to moderate stress. So how does emotion affect attention rate? Whether or not someone is really paying attention is influenced by the emotion attached to it. Keep in mind that the brain is designed for survival. The thalamus and amygdala assures that we react to emotionally relevant information. DeLue did a number of studies, and he's talking about very dangerous situations have enhanced memories, okay, extra vividness. And that's because of the stress response. Stop and think back to September 11th. On 9/11, if I ask you, where were you? Where did you hear about the information? How did you react? You can remember all of that because the emotion was hooked to that particular situation. Now, it can also be a very happy and exciting situation. Hopefully you remember exactly where you were on the day you were married, what the day was like, who was there, all the important things. So keep in mind the teachers can put putting an emotional hook to their lesson will really help them improve their retention and help them remember the information. I can remember studying the Civil War, we memorized dates and people and so forth. But when Roots came out and it really showed the vivid stories, the life stories, and put faces and pictures with people, it made a completely different impact on how I learned and how I studied the Civil War. Now, the hippocampus is located in the limbic system. It's the medial temporal lobe, and it's the region that regulates emotion. And it's associated with long-term memory. And it's really used for spatial navigation. It helps you with locating objects and people. I think this is interesting. And the University of California did a study in 2008 of the hippocampus and memory. And what happens when cortisol reaches the hippocampus? Well, then dendritic, there's supposed to be spines. That's a typo. Sorry about that. The dendrites have tiny little spines on them. And the dendrites are the little finger-like projections sticking out in a neuron. And they're very important for transmitting information. Well, if these spines begin to disintegrate, they're going to have difficulty passing information from one neuron to another. So learning really occurs across these synapses, the spaces in between the neurons. So there is a problem with consolidating short-term and long-term memory into long-term memory. Too much cortisol, memory is affected by this. In Dr. Wolf's book, Brain Matter, she states it pretty clearly. In the classroom, a student can perceive even a mild stressor to be threatening, initiating the stress response and lessening his or her ability to perform. So if a child is under stress, whether it's a family situation, remember we rated family very high. If he's worried about being abused at home, you think he really wants to learn about how to diagram a sentence? Okay. He's got other things on his mind. So, we have to be aware of what stress is doing and how it impacts our learning. Now, prolonged or chronic stress, the brain repeats the same responses. Remember, practice makes permanent. Right or wrong, you practice something over and over again, it gets stronger and stronger. So it causes neural pathways that controls anxiety and stress to become stronger and stronger. The brain actually, it's teaching itself to escalate the stress response. So response system is heightened, and prolonged stress short circuits other neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex. That's the front area of the brain. Now, this is where executive functions happen. So attention, creativity, flexibility, self-control, memory, critical thinking, and reasoning skills are all affected if a child is under stress. Robert Sylvester has written a number of great books. And he wrote, for example, The Celebration of Neurons, A Biological Brain in a Cultured Classroom, How to Explain the Brain, the Adolescent Brain. He was an educational neuroscientist who really explained how the brain functions. And he says that the brain initiates a cognitive sequence where our emotional arousal is triggered and activates our focus. So emotion will really guide our focus. This provides direction for critical thinking and problem solving to become engaged. So what role does emotion play in all of this? Well, Paul Ekman, back in the 50s, tried to come up with defining what are our basic emotions. There are 6 basic emotions in all cultures: happiness, surprise, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. And they usually all fall into this. Well, when a traumatic event such as 9/11 or the terrorist bombings, when they happens, 5 emotions are immediately triggered, all but happiness, obviously. So Robert Sylvester goes on to say, there are 2 separate problem-solving methods. So how does our brain solve these concerns that we have when something tragic happens? One is the conceptual or reflexive problem. So they respond quickly based on a small amount of emotional intense information, not interested in details. It says it's thus quite vulnerable to making racist, sexist, elitist responses based on only a few highly visible emotional charged elements. This makes sense of why people react the way they do at first. But our second response system is our analytical, reflective problem-solving system, and that's when our frontal lobes come into play and they process the information more slowly. When a situation happens, such as ISIS terrorist attack or 9/11, you get both a positive and a negative response from people. Positive response include like many volunteers stepping forward, donating funds, express sympathy, grief, show patriotism. But on the other hand, some people harass those who look like they're from the Middle East or origin of the Muslim faith. That's your negative response. Some go immediately to their religion, others blame religion. Some want peaceful resolution, some want military retaliation. I think one of the first things we need to do is help our students understand what stress is all about, how to handle it. And so they need to start with the emotions. Especially the younger children could look at Disney's Pixar movie, Inside Out. It's a cute little movie that tries to explain how emotions affect our brain and our learning. I really love the abstract thinking that they do in that movie. Very clever. And then on the second one, the second response system, our challenge, according to Sylvester, says, is to develop and use our reflective capabilities as much as possible, which makes sense. Now, helping students, suppose it's a national traumatic, something very big, such as the fires in California or the hurricanes down here in Florida. By going to their website, it says trauma recover services should be available to all administrators, teachers, students, families, and so forth. The second point, it says teachers, while serving as a crucial frontline role, should not be required to provide treatment. I think this is important. When a student has witnessed some violence in their home or in their neighborhood, a shooting or a killing, we need to help them as much as possible, but you as teachers really need to provide find some special additional help for them. So you need to start developing a strong network of the community agencies, which I know many schools already have that in plan, and getting stakeholders and so forth involved. That is critical to have that before it even happens. Now, I'm on the Florida ASCD board, which Betsy happened to mention, and if you go to our website, there's a huge list there of articles that teachers can use. What can I do as a teacher in the classroom to help these students that are under stress right now? So I didn't have time to list all of them, but if you go there, just click on our website and see all the free information that we have. And then note that ASCD, the national organization, their issue this month, December and January, is on mental health in schools. Okay. So I know what stress is, how the body reacts. So what can I do about it? All right, so let's talk a little bit about neurotransmitters. Those are chemicals that are released from one neuron to stimulate another neuron. Okay. And so endorphins are neurotransmitters that make you feel good. So how do I get these and where do they come from? So here's a little infographic that I designed that you can feel free to share with your students by all means. First, there's really two circles. There's an inner circle, although you can't see the blue line very well, but there's a number of objects that go around, and we're going to talk about each one of those that endorphins are released by. So if you look there, you see a little football player towards the top. So endorphins are released. It makes you feel good. If you love sports and you want to play sports, if you're not good at sports, or endorphins probably aren't released as well. So, and that's what a lot of these things depends on the individual. Some, they think, yes, this is very positive, I want to do this, and others, no. So you have to kind of pick and choose. But not only playing the sport, but watching the sport will also give you the same feeling. Endorphins are released when your favorite team wins. Okay, you're watching the Rose Bowl, depending who you're cheering for, those endorphins will be released. The next picture to your right, as you go around the circle, those little flames there, meditation is a great way to release the endorphins. The next one down is the older person helping the smaller one. It's really volunteering your time. When you volunteer, you want to help in a certain situation, but that also releases endorphins in your own brain, making you feel good about what you're doing. The next one down is playing video games. Endorphins are released by this. Now, not for me. I'm still trying to get Mario to jump over the wall, so forget it. That's definitely does not release any endorphins in my brain. But my son, who's in his 30s, loves to come home after work and he plays these video games. And now with today's graphics and so forth, but I know it's a stress release for him. Next one down, art. Either doing artwork or crafts or observing, appreciating good art can release endorphins. Prayer, no matter what religion, calms the inner soul and so forth, releasing endorphins. Dancing or watching, for example, Dancing the Stars. Maybe you just love to dance and all by yourself. What makes you feel good? That's great. Endorphins are released into your brain. Laughter. I think laughter is one of the best ways to release those endorphins, and it should be a lot of laughter and humor in the classroom. Falling in love. When you fell in love and you felt so good and you couldn't wait to be with that special someone, that's because of the endorphins that were in your system at the time. Music. either playing an instrument or listening to music. I think this is one of the fastest ways to change one's mood. I know I'm not real crazy about going out for my walk at times. And so today when it was time, I'm like, I really don't feel it. Well, I played tricks on myself and just said, all right, I'll only do one song and then I'll turn around and come back. Well, I picked the fastest moving, best song and pounded it into my ears. And before long, my mood was changed so quickly. And I got my full walk in no time. Reading. Those people that love to read, nothing is better than curling up in the corner with a good book on a rainy afternoon. So, but if you don't like to read, you're not going to have the endorphins released. Now go up to this red circle because I want to point this out. Directly above it, you see little dice. Why do people gamble? They gamble not only to win the money, but because it makes them feel good once they do that. I can remember we took my son for the first time when he was like 18, and we took him to a little casino, and he pulled the lever. And on his very first pull, he won $100. And back then, it was clink, 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 and you hear the money come down. And that in itself was releasing the endorphins. He was so excited. He goes, Mom, what do I do? He said, let's go cash it in. And I said, or you can just hang on to it for a minute. And he says, oh, okay, I'll hold on to it. Well, then as I turned around, I could see him sneaking in another, quarter now and then because he was already hooked. Luckily, we stopped him in time and he got home with $75. But anyways, so gambling really does release those endorphins. Eating. What is comfort food? Comfort food makes you feel good. So those endorphins are released. Now, when it's overdone, that's when you have overeaters and we have problems. Next one down is a picture of a guy hitting another one. It's fighting or bullying. Why do bullies bully someone? We all think it's terrible, but the bully, when he does it, really gets high off of the endorphins because it gives him power over another human being. He feels great. He feels stronger. And that's why he bullies. And that's what bullying is. And I think the children really need to understand that. Why does a person want to do that? Going down the line, you see that there's drugs there. Drugs were designed to help relieve pain, but they can also be overused. Okay. But drugs do release endorphins. And our morning cup of coffee. If I didn't have my morning cup of coffee, boy, it's a rough start in the morning. You see the little guy jumping out of an airplane down there. Well, that's definitely not for me. However, we have found that people in their mid to late 20s and early 30s are daredevils, a lot of them. And they get a real rush from doing dangerous things like, snowboarding or jumping out of an airplane or doing some crazy stuff like that. But it's because of the endorphins. Now, the next one is one of a lady shopping. See, now, I like to go shopping, especially if there's a sale. If there's a sale and you find something, the endorphins are released, and that's why you like doing it. Now, my husband, absolutely not. There's no endorphins there. The next one, you see the guy, and he's carrying a suitcase, and it's full of money. He's actually stealing. Embezzling releases endorphins. You feel good that you stole money. You got the money. Or even shoplifters. Why do some people shoplift and they could afford to buy the stuff? Is it a game or, what's the reason? But it's endorphins are released through that. Now, alcohol definitely releases endorphins. Now, I swear my next doctorate is going to be in how alcohol affects the brain, because I would love to just sit in a bar and watch people come in and watch their personalities change right before my face. With the first drink, they're smiling, and then they're loud, and then they're real friendly, and then some go too far and they become mean or whatever, but it changes the brain. The next one, chocolate. Now that's, having a piece of chocolate, I think, is great. When you eat the whole box, that's when it starts to get into a problem. But all of these items on this little chart do release endorphins. And notice the little girl in the middle, and she's talking, and she says, I can do this. This is good. Even the mentally thinking positive thoughts will reduce and increase the endorphins and reduce stress. So how do you help them reduce it? First of all, show them this chart. Talk about the things that can help them reduce the stress. But keep in mind, that doesn't take away the stress. If there is a bully that is bothering a child, sitting and listening to music is not going to solve the problem. It will help reduce the cortisol and reduce the stress somewhat, but you really have to address what the stress issue is. So quickly, how can we help students cope with stress? They need to understand what stress is. Every student needs an adult that they can trust, either their homeroom teacher or a counselor. We're looking at Matthew Lieberman in his book, Social, Why Our Brains Are Wired. Teachers need to allow for social connectivity within the classroom. In their lesson plans, the brain is designed to be social. And actually what this does, it will release stress. When they develop loving relationships, they want to fit into school. They want to cheer for their sports team. That's why they design Facebook pages. Okay. You want to have a culture in your classroom of all for one and one for all. You know, the tend and befriend is the new phrase. Having a good social relationship increases oxytocin, which actually reduces cortisol. Now, Berglund and his studies, I think this is interesting. Face-to-face relationships are the best. However, phone calls and even Facebook can reduce cortisol if they foster a feeling of genuine connectivity, if they feel that they honestly belong. Time management. When people are organized, they have less stress. So allow students maybe to have flexible due dates on an assignment. So if someone is behind, say, okay, we have 3 dates that this can be due. Allow that. Acknowledge for student effort, giving them a grade for their effort, providing extra points. This encourages students to take risks and really persevere. Teach mindfulness. This will help with the stress. From moment to moment awareness, focus on currently what is going on. It helps reduce anxiety and allow for individual needs. Teachers already know this. If they have test anxiety, there's little tricks and so forth that you can do. If they don't like to read orally, they get embarrassed, make sure that the passage that you call on them to read, that they could handle it and that they won't be embarrassed. Include physical activity within the school day. This one really bugs me, folks. When I hear that the recess time is being taken away from our school system, our physical education classes are cut back. The physical activity helps reduce stress, and our children's bodies are developing. So it's just amazing to me that they would even think of cutting back, and yet many schools have. And we already talked about the importance of keeping humor and laughter. It increases dopamine and reduces the stress. Lessons should strive to reach a deeper learning. I think a lot of our learning is so superficial, just facts and figures, dates, and so forth. And authentic performance tasks should be focused on. Media Education really does a great job in their new lesson plans that they're designing. Their project-based learning, it deepens students' understanding of factual and conceptual levels and deepens the learning. And Judy Willis, in one of her studies, wrote, when students experience their learning as personally meaningful, their intrinsic motivation strengthens long-term, durable memory networks. These are far more accessible for test retrieval and long-term access than rote memory. Create a mental suitcase. She also had the idea of right before a test, let them take a piece of paper out and write down different things like formulas and vocabulary and so forth. And doing this right before taking a test increases their retrieval efficiency. And then visualize a successful performance. Olympic performers, athletes, visualize how their performance is going to be. And this activates cortical motor brain networks. Not only does this activity reduce stress, it increases confidence and preheats the memory circuits that they want to access. So I think that's really, really important. Conclusion, I just want to mention that when we're under stress, the brain really gets hijacked, and teachers need to be aware of any stress that they may be, that's going on in the classroom or in their personal lives. We have little control over what's happening outside the classroom, but we need to be able to provide help for them if they need it. Understanding how stress affects learning will build emotional resilience as well as activate the highest level of cognition. And I just want to mention here, I'm giving a workshop, although I don't know if you can see the flyer or not, at Nova Southeastern University. It's a 3-hour workshop on stress. So if you're interested in that, it is free, but you just have to go and log in at the Nova website and register for that class. And then our Pat Wolf. This is the one I'd really like you to seriously consider. She's an outstanding educator, a leader in our field. She's our mentor. And she's coming down to the Orlando area to do a workshop on the neuroscience of teaching and learning. And it's a 4-day workshop. She provides a complete notebook with all of her CDs and her presentations, and you'll be able to go out and be a trainer immediately after doing this. This will be great. If you have any questions, please contact me or Dr. Wolf, or go right there to patwolftraining.com. All the information is there. Okay. All right. So I think, Betsy, that's about it. I think I've covered most of the information and so forth.
Okay. Well, we excuse me. We do have at least one question, and I would encourage anybody who would like Lou to elaborate on something, or if something wasn't clear, or if you just have another question related to stress and learning. But one of the questions that came through in the chat is there any research on the connection of stress and children with learning disabilities? It seems that these students are much more stressed and anxious than, I think she means, than other students, and always wonder which causes which. Is that does the stress interfere with the learning and then sort of cause a learning disability, or is the learning disability then causing, which way do you think it goes, and how would you suggest tackling
good
that?
question. And which came first, the chicken or the egg? That's a real tough question, because children obviously with learning disabilities have enough concerns, and then to add additional stress on top of all of this, or just the stress of their learning disability alone. David Sousa really has a good reference book in which to turn to. And I can't think of the title of the book right now, but David Sousa will talk about children with learning disabilities and how to work with them, and how stress in particular.
And we do hear that a lot in our Sousa, Souza. I don't know. I've got some of his books on my shelf. I should just go look. Sousa. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's how the special.
I think
I have it right here. How the special needs brain learns. How the special needs brain learns. Yeah, that's a great.
He's written a number of books. I think that he, Pat Wolf, are some of the early pioneers. Bob Sylvester as well. Some of the early pioneers of translating neuroscience research into the classroom. In the work that we do, we work with a lot of schools and a lot of special education teachers, resource teachers, and I hear constantly how much anxiety is associated with learning disabilities. And anytime we're in a situation where we feel like we can't do something, that's a stressful situation. So by definition, just about any learning situation for kids who have cognitive deficits or other kinds of learning disabilities are going to be stressful. And so when we think about addressing those kinds of things, Lou, I love you to expand on this as well, but we think about accommodations and helping them compensate, work around, work with their stress, understand it better, but also addressing, as you said before, the underlying causes, where if we can improve their learning ability, then that can also help reduce that stress. And I don't know if you saw that in the work that you did when you were principal.
Yeah, I was principal of Pope John Paul Catholic School. And Betsy, I want to talk just for a minute about Brainware Safari, because I think when our students became involved in that program, having to do with their cognitive ability, we asked the students to start the program, and we tested them before and after and so forth. Well, we had one little gal who was in my test pilot at the school, I picked students from learning disabilities to gifted and so forth. Well, this one child who was very gifted, extremely bright, was a straight A student when she came in, was a straight A student when she left after she was through with Brainware Safari. I'll be very honest with you. I didn't see any difference. The teachers didn't notice any difference in the classroom. So we asked the parents, because we surveyed all of our parents afterwards after taking the program, have you noticed any difference? And the mother said, oh my, yes. And we said, what? And I mean, she's just as brilliant as she was. She goes, oh no, but now she can handle stress so much better. And I went, what do you mean? And she said, well, the games kept getting harder and harder as they're playing them, as you know. And she's always used to being at the top. And when she was stopped and she couldn't solve the problem and she had to work on it, she had to come back to it. And then she was turned away and she had to keep coming back to it. She began to handle stress and she began to understand that no matter how hard it is, she'll be able to conquer it. As she said, she was her own worst enemy when it came to homework. She would come home when she got anything below a 95, no matter what the parents said. Honey, a 90 is great. Oh my gosh, a B is okay. I mean, that's wonderful. It's no matter what they said. And we could tell it was causing a great deal of stress within herself. And so how did they get this? She said, now with Brainware Safari, she came home the other day, she had a 90 on a test and she goes, Mom, I got a 90. She says, but that's okay. I've got this down. I'm going to do a lot better and I'm going to be able to conquer this without any problem. And just that kind of situation. I think our children really need to be in situations to experience stress and then learn how to cope with it and how to handle it. Mm-hmm.
Lou, we have another question about the connection or the impact of stress on perception.
I'm not quite sure what they mean by that question.
Well, does stress affect how we perceive a situation?
Sure. I see what they're saying. Absolutely. If you're under a great deal of stress and you're worried about, if someone can respond to you, if you're nervous or upset and they say, what did you mean by that? You can take that in many different ways. So yes, stress can affect your perception of what is actually going on. Very true. Mm-hmm.
And as you said before, it would also impact a student's ability to attend to or focus on something. And if you're not focused on it, you're mm-hmm. not taking in that information. So that would be definitely something that would intervene. Please make sure anybody who's got other questions to go ahead and type them into the chat window.
I see
for a few more
Robert
minutes
Sapolsky is presenting and speaking at the Learning and Brain Conference in New York in April. This is Susan wrote that in here. Well, if you get a chance, go see him. He is an incredible presenter. He's got a great sense of humor, and his studies are excellent. So by all means, if you get a chance to see him, go.
That's something to start putting on the calendar. Let me ask a little bit about this. So what I heard you referring to a lot during the information that you shared with us this afternoon is helping students understand. So it's not just, the teachers and parents understanding that a student is having stress, but helping students understand that stress as well.
Yeah, that's all with the emotional intelligence, and not only recognizing it in themselves, but noticing when a classmate is under stress, because they're not going to be at their best either. So those cues need to be taught even at a very early age, first, second grade. When a child is struggling or having a tough day, and that needs to be taught and explained.
And so how would you design, put you on the spot here, spur of the moment, but, designing something where you could address this with the group, because you don't necessarily want to do it
Correct.
In the midst of a stressful situation, right? So what would be?
Yeah, I think I'd start with that slide that I just showed you about what emotions are and so forth. So So, and how we react. And have you ever been in a stressful situation, or what is stress? And then letting the kids come out. Let's talk about what is stress. You don't want to bring it up. Yeah, there was a shooting in Tommy's neighborhood. Poor Tommy. That's not the time to do it, obviously. But so you lay this groundwork ahead of time, ahead of situations, but also letting them know that whenever they're under stress, because sometimes they don't want to talk about it, that the school is available to help. They will find help for you. You're never alone. And to explain, look at how all the stuff that we have set up here, not only do we have the guidance counselors, but we have nurses, and we have the hospital, and we have all kinds of things all in place if you ever need additional assistance, and to be there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so giving them sort
Right.
of a way
Right.
to navigate when they're
before
before
yes,
they
absolutely.
need it, rather than
Yeah. And just like we said, if you really want to go into more in depth, I'm doing the class again for Nova. That is free. It's in Orlando at the end of January. And then Dr. Pat Wolf coming down here at the end of February for 4 days for a very intense workshop and great networking group. What I do love about Dr. Wolf, she believes that professional development should be ongoing forever. And I think, Betsy, I know I was trained, oh my goodness, 15, 20 years ago, about 15 years ago. And every year, Pat brings in 2 neuroscientists to Napa Valley. And a group of us, we call ourselves the Brainy Bunch. We go to Napa for a week, sit down with them, hear what they're doing, and then we translate that into classroom practice. So what does this mean? How should this affect our teaching? And the networking of those professionals is priceless. It's a wonderful.
it is really an extraordinary opportunity. And Susan Clayton, who's on the is one of our Brainy Bunch members as well. We often have Brainy Bunch folks here, and so actually Lou and I are headed to Napa next week, where we're going to have a couple of neuroscientists that are going to speak to our group of 25 or 30 Brainy Bunch members. So it's really an extraordinary opportunity to get very involved with and very hands-on with and very really develop your capabilities in applying neuroscience in really meaningful ways, whatever your role in education might be. So definitely worth some thought. If you're going to do any professional development this year, I would put this at the top of your list. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it. We look forward to seeing you at another webinar. I think next month I'm planning to talk about cognitive skills in English language learners. And so there's certainly some stress involved in that as well, but we'll address it again from a cognitive and neuroscience point of view, as we do everything we do. So Lou, thank you so much for agreeing to join us today and for sharing all this wonderful information. And lots of thanks are coming through on the chat window as well. So it was great. And
okay, sounds wonderful. Thank you all very much, and stay warm. Hope everybody's warm. It's beautiful down here in Florida, 45.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks again, Lou. Take care. Thanks, everybody.